So good evening, everybody. I'm Alexia, and I'm in charge of the international expansion of Trello. And today I'm going to talk about Trello, the story, how we became who we are today. And this is not only about the product and the different phases of the product. This is very linked to our remote culture and how we implemented it and what we've learned from it. And I'll then wrap up with a small overview of how we use Trello internally, and maybe you can find some inspiration in that. So if we start, first we just announced 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago that we passed 25 million signups. So this is a big mark for us because when we started Trello, the goal was to reach 100 million signups. So we're closer to that, not there yet, but closer to it. And so today I'm gonna start with a quick overview of like the story behind Trello and how we became the tool we are today. So first, this is the very first Trello thing that ever existed. This is from Justin Gallagher's notebook, one of our designers and the first person to work on Trello. And this comes from something we call Creek Week. So Trello, for those who don't know, comes from Fog Creek, which is a software company that was founded by Michael Pryor and Joel Spolsky. And the goal of this company was basically to empower developers, because in 2000, most developers were support developers in big companies in New York. And most of the time they were, working on the third floor, like basement floor, and didn't really have a lot of power within the companies. And so the idea of Fog Creek was really to empower developers, make them work in very good condition, and have them develop the product they wanted. And part of this philosophy, they had what they called Creek Week. And Creek Week is basically a week you can take where you don't have to work on your usual work. Like we know you will not work on that. They were open to that. But you should work on any type of content you think, like any type of project you think can be innovative or fun or interesting for the company. The only condition was that at the end of the week, you should present what you had been working on. And so Bobby Grace and Justin Gallagher came together and wanted to work on something, a concept that they had internally that's called the Rule of 5. So what it is, like, they had a lot of different projects, new product launching and things like that. And so when the executive team wanted to understand what was happening within the company, they would ask the managers, what is your team working on? And the managers will say, oh, we are working on this very long list of items, which we know is not really true. You never work on more than 5 things at the same time. And so this is what we've called the Rule of 5. And this is very simple. You need to communicate 5 things. The two first one are 2 things you are working on right now. The 2 other one are 2 things you will be working on next, so that we give context on what's coming up. And the last thing is something you are not working on. And this is actually very important because it shows to other people that you made the decision of not working on that specific project. And you have the right of not doing it, but also when you communicate on it, people understand why you are not answering their questions, or people understand why you are not, like, maybe there is a blocker so that you cannot move on. And so when you communicate on it, it's better. And so based on this Rule of 5, they wanted to create a tool that gave you overview on the task you were working on. And this is kind of how Trello was created. So this is the first prototype of Trello. It's a very old image, but it's very interesting. And so this is the kind of this concept of 5 things. So obviously there were other concepts that inspired a Trello board. Some like the Kanban methodology, the simple post-it that they could see in everybody's offices and didn't really understand why it wasn't digital yet. And so, but thanks to all this inspiration, it became Trello. So just before I continue, how many of you use Trello now? At least I have already seen a Trello board in their life. Okay, so I'll keep on talking about Trello. So one of the things that is important with this concept of the Rule of 5 is that Trello is a horizontal tool. And sometimes people are like, oh, Trello is good, but sometimes I have so many cards that I need to scroll down and it's very hard and like I cannot really use it anymore. And so we believe that there is no good way or bad way of using Trello, but the only constraint that we see is that most of your workflow should fit within a screen. And the reason why it's hard to scroll down is that we believe that you cannot really have overview if you start having so many cards that it doesn't fit anymore. So this is something that we analyze internally all the time. And so when our workflows start growing and that it doesn't really fit anymore, then we know that we need to start rethinking it. So maybe some cards should become other boards, or maybe some cards should become checklists, or maybe... So this overview is actually very important in the pure concept of Trello. So after the prototype was built, 2 other engineers joined the 2 designers, and they started working on Trello and make it an available product. And they had a launch date, which was TechCrunch Disrupt in 2011. And so this is one of our founder, Joel Spolsky. And so they launched, they participated in a contest, startup pitch contest, and they lost. But the good news with this pitch is that the next week they had actually gained 25,000 signups. So they saw that there were an interest in the product. And something they had done in the beta process was that they wanted to create a product that anybody could use. And so what they did is that they came to a lawyer firm and they said, look, can you use this tool and try to see if you can use it and like give us feedback? And so why did they choose lawyer? It's just that it's not tech people, like in general. They have a very strong, they had a very strong network of dev, but they wanted to test it outside of this network. And what was interesting is that after a week or two of using it, the lawyer came back to them and had very specific feedback. So the feedback was like, oh, I can drag and drop the card, but then if I want to add a checklist, I cannot do it. And so what they understood is that the lawyers had understood the pure concept of Trello, but they wanted more of that. And so for them, that was a really good proof that the product could grow among any kind of sectors. So after the launch at TechCrunch, they kept on adding people to work on the product. And so this is a picture of the team in 2014, right before Trello became its own incorporation. So we spun off for Creek, and we fundraised $10 million. And back then, everybody was still working at the New York office. So this is at the New York office. But then someone came, and his name is Brett. He was one of the two devs that worked on Trello. And he said, well, my wife just got a job offer in Hawaii, and I need to move to Hawaii. And this is the first time that they accepted on having someone remote. And they were like, okay, we agree on doing it because it's Brett, we already know him, and we want to test it. Maybe it won't work, but we still want to work with Brett. And so this is how the remote culture started at Trello. So thank you, Brett. And so at first it was very complicated because they didn't know how to communicate. You had to find like new ways of communicating, to informing people of the work you were working on, to make sure that Brett felt included. So when people were meeting in New York, how do they make sure that Brett knows about what's happening? And so this is based on that we started learning on how to be a better remote company. So I will go deeper into what we do and the guidelines that we use, but this is how it started. After in the timeline, in 2016, we launched in 21 languages. So this was one of the projects we wanted to work on. In this, considering this goal of growing to 100 million signups, we needed to lower as many barriers as we could. And so one was the price. So Trello is free, but we also have a paid version for extra features. And the second one was the language. So for those of you who use Trello, you know that most of the time in Trello, you don't really need to understand English to use it because most of the content is created by you. But still, there are some words that were in English. And we heard from a lot of users, I cannot use Trello with my team because it's in English and they don't speak English. And we're like, well, but it's not really in English. It is in English, but very few words. And they were, no, I cannot use it with my team. And so this is when we started thinking about translating the product. And so I can go deeper into that because that's one of the projects I've managed. But what we did is that for 17 languages, we actually crowdsourced the translation. So 500 of our users volunteered in helping us translate the product. And in 4 months, we were able to launch in 17 new languages. So it was a total of 21 languages. So I'm very sorry about that. Danish is not one of them, but hopefully it will be a part of the next bunch of languages we translate. After that, something else happened, which is pretty important. We got acquired by Atlassian. So Atlassian is a company that owns several products. One of them is Jira. And so it was back in January this year, and it was a 425 million acquisition, so quite a big one. And for us, it has been very interesting seeing them because we have much more resources than just being a startup, and so we can continue to give at least the best experience we can to the users. So back to remote work. How remote are we today? So today we have about 120 people working on Trello, and 65% of them are working from home. And this is, so if you count, like, you know, we've grown, but we maintain this remote culture. Something that is important is that we still have people working from the office, and we still hire people that don't want to be remote. The only condition we put is that those people should embrace the remote culture and agree on the fact that not all of their coworkers will be in office. And so now I'm gonna share some learnings we've had of implementing this culture and what we've learned. And something very important about those learnings is that they don't necessarily apply to remote work only. So how many of you work remote here? Okay, some of you, that's good. Something that's important with remote work is that it exacerbates the fact that you cannot communicate with someone because that person is not next to you. But if you think about offices, like sometimes you work with someone who is in another team, or that person is in another office, or that person is in another country. So all of us, even when we are within an office, face communication issues. And so what we've learned is more extreme because we are separated physically, but those advices can be applied to anybody that works with other people. So first one is empathy, and why. So when we decided to go remote, we had to understand like what is the concept of a successful team? Like what makes a team successful? Will the fact that we are distributed change the way we are successful or not? And so we looked at a project called Project Aristotle by Google, and they researched what makes a team successful. And so first they found out what doesn't make a team successful. So the first thing is individual IQ doesn't make a team more successful. So if you have one person that's very smart in your team, doesn't mean that your team will be successful. Aggregated IQ, same thing, doesn't make your team successful. Proximity, neither. And this is something interesting for us. So it meant that it's not because you're in the same place that you will be successful. So that was a good point for us to try to be remote. Experience, same thing, doesn't make a team successful. And examples such as Facebook or any new tech companies that like really grew fast proves it. And interestingly enough, leadership doesn't make a team more successful. But empathy is the key. And empathy is really this thing about how much you care about your coworkers, how much you all together work and want to thrive together. And this is something, creating an empathy is pretty easy when you are next to your neighbor, or to your coworker, sorry, because you can chat about them, learn about who they are, learn about their kids, their friends, their family, their interests. When you work alone from your room, it's a bit harder to do that with your coworkers. And so we had to create ways of creating empathy between the workers. So how did we do that? First, we created Trello boards, because that's what we know how to do. This is a board of what we call Mr. Roger. So Mr. Roger is something we do every month. We meet with 4 other people from the company, and we talk about everything but work. So you have to imagine that those moments are actually something we do with anybody in the company. So the CEO will be in a Mr. Roger with someone who just or the salesperson will be talking to a marketing person. And what's important is that we don't talk about work. We really just get to learn each other as individuals. And something very interesting with remote work is that you get talents from everywhere. And so you get people with very different contexts and people with different family or interests, because they are not linked together by the place where they live, but they are linked together by the project that they are working on. And so this is something that, like, creating those Mr. Roger moments were very important to us. We also try to create social moments between us. And so one way of doing it is we use a chat tool. And within this chat tool, we have rooms that are for social things. So there is one that I really like that's called Small Humans. And this is where all parents share picture of their kids and like happy moments with their kids and very bad moments with their kids, and like just share like what parents want to share, but also non-parents can be there and participate in this discussion. And so this is a way of creating empathy with people you don't really know physically, but that you have learned to know digitally. Another room is about yoga, and we have cooking, travel, like anything that people care about. We also just started doing something that I really like, is a running group. So everybody that has that wants to run and have like goals in running, they just every week they set a goal of like, you know, all of us should just run 10 kilometers. And then at the end of the week, they just check that people did it or not. And so this is a way of like interacting together, even if you're not together. Something else we do is actually, we meet. So it's not because you are remote that you shouldn't meet in person. But we have a rule that's like a guideline, I would say, that's very important to us, is that we shouldn't need to meet to start working together. Work is not related to the fact that we meet. So actually, every time we meet, we don't work. And one thing that's interesting is that we meet once per year as like the full company. And we meet as teams during the year. But this is, because we are remote, we really value those moments. So for us, it's a really great moment to get to know people. And so we do a lot of activities to make sure that we get to know each other better. And we try to have fun. So I talked about empathy and the fact that you can create this empathy digitally, and that it is actually important to do it. I know there is a tool, it's actually a French company that does that for big companies. So when you work in a big companies, it's very hard for you to get to know everybody. So what they do is that they match people at lunch, and so you can have lunch with people from your company. And so this is a way of getting to know people from your company during lunch. So something else we've learned is around communication. So when you work remotely, your only way to connect to other people is the internet. And so you need to try to understand how to use the internet for that. What we've learned is that, so first thing is that you need to be very well equipped. So we make sure that everybody has access to a good internet connection, that they have the right settings at home, that we try to have, we know it's not always possible, but we ask people to have a separate room so that when they work, they are not disturbed. But we also make sure that they are using the right tools. And so we use different chat tools, video conference tools, and we always evolve with them, because when we were a company of like 25 people and now we are 120, this is a very different way of working, and so the tools are adapting along the way. Something we try to give as much context as possible. So I think this is something that everybody has been through. Let's say that a coworker sends you a message, and you are not at home. You are visiting you are not at work. Sorry, you are visiting a client, and so you are on your cell phone. The way you will write on your cell phone is very different from the way that you will write if you are on your laptop. And so it is very important to give context. So on your cell phone, most of the time you type very quickly and you make very short sentences. And so let's say that like Jordan asks me something. And if I'm on my cell phone, I will just say, no, we cannot do it. And he will be like, wow, she's not really friendly today. But if I tell him, oh no, I'm on my cell phone. No, we cannot do it. It would be like, oh, okay. She doesn't have time to explain me why, but she's giving me an answer that I need it. And I understand that she cannot develop more because she's on her cell phone. So this is something we really try to communicate on. Same thing, as mentioned, we have a lot of parents that work from home. And so sometimes, then I don't know, one of their kids is sick, or their kids came back from school, and so they may not work for a couple hours because they are with the kids. But then, so they will end earlier, but then they will reconnect later. And they just say it. They just say, right now the kids are back. I cannot answer, and people will understand. And so giving as much context as you can is very important. Another thing we do is also we explain what is our preferred channel for communication. So some people love email, some people love chat, some people love Trello, some people, there are so many ways of communicating. And so we make sure like we respect how people prefer to communicate. Another thing we have, this is something we've learned along the way. It's how to do meetings. And this is something that can be applied to any kind of companies that needs to do video conference with people that are not present in person. So what we were doing is that people from the New York office would meet together. Every time we had meetings, people from the New York office will meet together in the meeting room. They will put on the screen, like the TV screen, use the camera, and they will put the remote people on the TV. And it created the worst experience ever, because the people in the room would be together and starting doing jokes or interrupting each other. But the people on the TV will not have the same experience. And so it created two groups of people, and it was a very bad experience. So what we decided to do is what we call, this is the one person, one laptop rule, which is basically if you have a meeting and there is at least one person in the meeting that is remote, then everybody should go remote on their laptop. And so everybody should be on their laptop. So every month we have a 120 people meeting, which is our company meeting, and all of us are on our laptop. So you have to imagine that if you go to the office at that time, you will see 30 people seated next to each other on their laptop, talking to each other on their laptop. So this is kind of strange, but it works very well. And so it is much more inclusive for the remote people. And this is something you can apply to anything. Like if you are meeting with one of your clients on a conference call, you can still meet with them. But if all of you are on one computer, then the experience for your client will be much better. Then we also do something, is that it's the onboarding process. So the hiring process includes the remote part of our life. So even if someone applies for a job and wants to be based in HQ in New York, we make sure that during the hiring process, they do remote interview, because they will have to work remotely, to work with remote people. So making sure that they have the communication skills of talking to a camera is very important to us. So we make sure that we include that. Also, we have boards. As I said, we use a lot of boards. And this is our new hire onboarding board. And this is a place we use to gather every information that is important to onboard a new person. So the first list is called Before First Day. And this is a place where the legal team, the IT team, the HR team, the manager come together and talk about everything that needs to be prepared before the first day of that person. Then the second list is called On First Day, First Week. And it is a list of tasks that the person needs to do on their first week. So when they are done, they drag and drop the card and put it in the done column. So this is a very good way for us to work together and to make sure that the person gets all the information they need. And we simply have a template that we copy and paste, and we create a board that is flexible, because for every new hire we add new information. Something that's good with that is that because we a lot of HR resources, if the HR person was out, we could still onboard new people. So this is really relying on technology to actually make things work. Something we also do on this board is that we share our story. So you cannot see the list on the screen, but we have a list that's called Company Culture, where we share the story of what has happened before, and so that new people knows what we are talking about. And so one of the cards is actually about the jokes and like the internal jokes. So it happens everywhere. We have internal jokes, but then when you're a newcomer, you have no idea what people are talking about. And so it's the nice way of including new people and like letting them know what's happening. So something like I want to share is that not all communication is equal. And this is very important to understand that and to always question what communication tool you are using and how and why. And so if you're on the chat, it's because you want to talk with someone quickly. But then maybe you will make a decision on the chat. And if you make a decision, then it should go on the platform you use to make decisions. In our case, it's Trello. And so this is the way we do it. Like we chat because we're humans and we need to chat. But then if we make a decision or if we share something that needs to stay for a longer time, we put it into Trello. And this is a way for us to all have the same information. So always think about it and always think about giving the context. Then the last learning is that collaboration tools are the new workplace. So whether we like it or not, this is happening. And so we are trying to, this is like, we want to show what they can bring to you as a team. So the first thing is that collaboration tools are social value. And so as mentioned before, like you can connect as humans being through digital tools, like it works. This is one integration that we have with Appear-in. So I'm not sure if you know Appear-in. It's a chat tool, like a video chat tool. They are Norwegian, and we have done a lot of things with them. We have a power-up, we have integrations, we have a lot of different things. And this is actually an embedded board within the chat tool. So you are on a chat, like on a video, conference. You are talking together, and you can integrate and all look at the board at the same time and work on the board at the same time and still talk together. So this is like a nice way of bringing video and Trello together. Another thing is are the goals. So one way of keeping us all going in the same direction is to have the same goals. And we use it in a very flexible way. So what we do is that we have the company goals, we have the team goals, we have the individual goals, but we make sure that we're flexible with it because sometimes something comes up and it is more urgent than what you had in mind. But if you communicate about it, then it's fine. People will understand what's happening. It's kind of like this the rule of 5, the one like I'm not doing it. This is kind of this concept of like, yeah, I know I'm not doing it, but I'm aware of it. And so the way we do it internally now is that we have this company overview board where every team and every project manager share the updates of the thing they are working on. And so every week they comment on it and share information that is valuable for the whole group. So let's say that like the product team is launching a new feature. This will affect the marketing team, the support team, the sales team. And so making sure that this information is shared is very important. And so this is, for us, this is kind of like the summit that you will send to your boss, but if you send it in a Word format, probably they won't read it. So for us, it's like a nice way of sharing quickly some information. And then another thing we do is that we have this name we call dog fooding. And so which is the fact that we use our own tool to create our own tool. So we use Trello for everything, but we also make sure that we feel the same pain point than our users. We just got acquired by a 2,000 people company. We learned how it is to onboard 2,000 people at once. And this is not something we could test before, really. And now we are living it. And so we make sure that we go into the shoes of the users and leave everything we can, and then we can iterate on that and make it a better product. So I shouldn't say that, but some features you have are also linked to the fact that some devs really wanted one feature, and so they wanted to make sure they had a better product. But we also receive a lot of feedback and requests, and this is something we always try to listen to and to integrate into our product. And I think this is like collaborating on that is very important. We have a value that is called don't do nothing. And don't do nothing is basically, if you see something broken, fix it. And it is really like about being responsible for the community and making sure that you take action. So let's say that I'm on the blog and I'm seeing a typo. It's not my job to correct that typo, but I can tell the person that's owning the blog that there is a typo in there, and this will make their life easier. And so this is something we do all the time. And this is really this is how a workplace would work. If you're at in an office, you will just go to that person and say hey, that there's a typo on it. For us, we don't have the office, but we have places, like we have specific boards where we share those kind of information, or chat rooms within our chat tool, where we make sure that we tell the people that something is happening. And so this is like really this thing of like collaboration tools are places, and we have humans interacting in there, and this is where the future of work relies. As mentioned, so this is an article that went out in the Swedish press. I'm not 100% sure what they say because I don't speak Swedish, but I know that we shared some remote tip on it. So you can, if you can read Swedish or use Google Translate, you can find some tips on it on how to work remotely. Other guidelines, so this is kind of a sum up of the guidelines I've been through. So use chat rooms to get to know each other, which is very important. Meet both online and offline. Only use meetings for decision making. So this is something I'm going to explore later. Everyone or no one on video conference, and always give context. Oh, so sorry, that's us. So you can see I'm here and Jordan is there too. So this is for real. And always give context. So now I'm going to share some Trello boards that we use internally and that can show you how, as a remote team, we work together. So this is about meetings. So this is the marketing overview board where all the marketing team interact. And so we have one list that's about giving context. So that's the second one. And this is a list where we create cards when we're on vacation, or if we are sick, or if we want to inform that we won't be there. So this is a way of giving context. The third list is called team meeting. And this is how we do our meetings. So something important when you're remote is that you have time to do other things than work. So when you work, you want it to be efficient. And so something we do meet quite a lot, but we meet every time we meet is to make decisions and to make progress. And so the way we do it is that in the third list, during the week, we will create cards on topics we want to share with the team. And so every time we have something that comes up and we think, oh, this is actually something I would like the others to know, or this is a question I have for the others, we just create a card in there. And so we, as a team, create the agenda of the meeting. And the good thing with that is that when it's the time to meet, sometimes there is no cards, so we don't need a meeting. Sometimes there are a lot of cards, and so we know that it will be a long meeting. But it's a way of like knowing what's going to happen and having context and coming prepared to the meeting. Another thing we do is that we have a meeting lead that moderates the meeting and makes sure that everybody's topics can be attended. And something we do because, I don't know, I think we love consensus, is that we change the meeting lead every time so that everybody gets the responsibility of being the lead. We also have a scribe that we change, and this person will just take notes. And so anybody that couldn't make it to the meeting can know what happened because we make notes on each card. Then we have some other cards that are funny to talk about. One, it's called Wednesday Woos. So we meet on Wednesday. And a woo is a mistake we've done during the week. So we are all humans. We all make mistakes. And this is kind of a group therapy thing. And so I'm French, and I'm very skeptical with some management processes in the US, I would say. And so when they were like, oh, we need to share our mistakes, I was like, well, okay, well, we'll see. But what was interesting is that today I really love this part, because let's say that during the week I send an email to the wrong person. Instead of having anxiety for 3 days about it, I just think, oh, this is my woo. And that's it. And what I do is that during the meeting, I share my woo. And so by the fact that I'm sharing it, I'm taking responsibility for it because I'm telling the other it happened. But also they are learning from my mistakes and I'm learning from others' mistakes. And so I think this is something very interesting as a team to create more empathy. Then we have the team Bravo. So as you can tell, guess it's like we acknowledge that someone did something good. And then we have a special one that's called Gossip, Rumors and Lies. For this one, the scribe doesn't write nothing down. And this is just a place where we share things we've heard or information we've heard about the company, about other teams. And it's more like trying to represent, like recreate those gossips and rumors that you would hear in an office that you wouldn't. And then below that, we just create cards of all the topics we want to attend. We also have a card that's about user learnings. And so every week, we try to share things we've heard about the users. So an interesting way of using Trello or a difficulty of onboarding someone. And so we try to learn from that also. So this is about meetings, and I think it's really relevant because it can be applied everywhere. Letting people know about the agenda in advance and making sure that everybody takes part in creating the agenda actually makes a meeting much more efficient. Knowing what the length of the meeting would be like and having someone moderating it are part of those processes we've implemented to have very efficient meeting. And in the end, we love to meet, which is very good. This is another workflow. This is an editorial calendar. So this is how we publish on our blog. And I think that's a nice way of understanding that for what work is about. So for some people, work is about spending 8 hours in front of their computer, working with their teams, and not really collaborating more than that. For us, work is really about producing and making sure you contribute to the common effort. And so the way we created this board is really thinking about, okay, what's the purpose of the blog? So we want to publish 3 posts per week. How do we do that? We have several steps. Who interact with that? We have the content team, we have the design team, we have the social community team. And so what we do is that the board is created along those steps, so each list is a step. The cards are the different posts that go from one list to the other. And then the design team only subscribe to this list that's about editing and graphics. And so they don't need to know what happened before. They just need to know that this post is ready to have design assets, and they work on it. And once it's done, we move it to publishing. So this is a nice way of collaborating within teams and thinking about the project itself and what you want to achieve. Another one is sales and legal. So to close a deal, salespeople need to sign a contract. And to sign a contract, they need a lot of advice from the legal team. And so a nice way of not using email is using this Trello board. And so each card represents a client, and all information about that client are on the card. So even if someone is sick, their manager or their coworkers can see what's happening with this deal. And so this is a very good way of having all the information in one place and having history about what happened. And especially in that case, like most of the time when you have legal involved, it means very long documents that needs a lot of revision, and so you end up with a lot of versions. And so this is a nice way of having all the revised version in one place and find it more easily. This is a very different way of using Trello. So this is Twitter. They use Trello to promote their roadmap for their platform API. So they have a roadmap. They are building an API. They have a roadmap for that. And so they just share the link with their community. And on that board, their community can see what's coming up next. Slack does the same thing. But we have like very different companies that do that. So like the UN, for instance, they send their press release on Trello boards. So on the Trello board, they put all the information they want to share with journalists. They do that in 5 or 6 different languages or even more, and they just send the link. So there are tons of ways of using Trello, and it can be within the same company. It can be something you can use to work with external people. It can be like anything you want, pretty much. This is a dev board. And so a question I got a lot is that, does Trello use the Scrum methodology internally? And I don't think we do. So, but we do use Trello boards to do it. And so this is examples of of boards we have created. So we don't have templates, and it's on purpose. Because Trello is kind of like, you need to think about it as an Excel spreadsheet. You can use an Excel spreadsheet to do very basic things like your shopping list or your phone book, but you can use an Excel spreadsheet to do macro and very complex spreadsheets. Trello is kind of like that. You can use it to do your shopping list, your phone book. You can use it to do very complex project management. So this is something we've always wanted to do. And this is why the core product, we try to make it as simple as possible. But we also have like very different examples of how to use it. So a good one that I really like, Jordan just became a dad 5 months ago. And he chose his daughter's name on Trello. So he had a list of all the names he wanted. And then with his partner, they chose Nora, which is a beautiful name. So this is really like, you can use Trello for pretty much everything. And when we talk with users, we learn so many ways of using it. Like in the US, there are a lot of agile family that use Trello with their kids to make sure they brush their teeth and they do their homework, and then they drag and drop the card into the done column. So speaking of the product, those are some product principles. And I'll talk about 4 of them. The first one is that we try to be universal. So I talked about the fact that we're a free product, and we are not a freemium product. So you are never blocked on your use of Trello. But if you want extra features, then you can pay for it. So our extra features rely on integration with other tools, so that you can. So this is called power-ups, and so you can give power to your boards depending on what you want to do. And also we have a lot of administration features linked to, you are a big company and you cannot, everybody use Trello. You cannot really control what people put on there, but you can control the fact that only people from your company will have access to those boards. So this is the kind of extra feature that we have. But apart from that, we are universal in the sense that we are on a lot of different platforms. And we just released the desktop app last 2 weeks ago, I think. And also we're available offline. And I know that offline is not really the future of the internet, but what we found out is that a lot of people don't always have a good connection, or no connection at all. If you're on a plane or in the subway, you don't have connection. And so going offline was for us a way of letting people use Trello wherever they are. So if you go on a trip and you don't have access to data or Wi-Fi, you can still plan your trip on Trello and use it to travel. Also, we try to always be easy and flexible. And this is the thing about the fact that like Trello is for everybody. So we should let you use it the way you want. We never force you onto a template or a process or a methodology. You choose to do that. And so this is something that a lot of companies tell us, is like, we have a process and we need a tool, a digital tool to make that process happen. And we tell them, well, you can use Trello because you can put any kind of process into Trello. You don't have to follow our specific methodology. So this is something very important for us. And this is where the power-ups come. So this is one part of the list of the power-ups we have. I think we are launching 1 power-up every week right now, so you can find a lot of different features. But the idea is that everybody works with different tools. Teams work with different tools. And we don't want to compete against everybody, and we don't want people to only use Trello. This is really not what we want. We want people to be using the tool they need when they need it. And for that, something that's interesting is that when you enable a power-up, you enable it only on one board. And sometimes some people are frustrated because they would like to have it on every board and not have to enable them every time. But if you think about it, like let's say you enable a Gantt chart power-up, you need it for some project. But then if you want to create your travel board, you will not need the Gantt chart power-up. And so this is a way of being flexible and attending your use case every time you have a new one. So this is something very important. Also, if you are a dev and wants to create a power-up, we have an open API, and you are really welcome to do it. We try also to be fun. And so we try to, it's kind of like putting the human within the product. So we did recently a partnership with Unsplash, which is a picture website. And so every week you can choose background pictures from their website, and it changes all the time. And what we found out is that some users spend hours choosing the picture before they create a board. So this is really something people relate to. This is also something you can use if you want to have like a group of, like you have different boards that are on the same project and you want to have the same picture or the same color as the background. That's also a way of filtering boards. We have stickers. And stickers, like, don't negligent those. Like, they're important because as human, like, one thing is that we talk, but we also have emotions, and we have, you know, we use gesture and things like that. And so stickers and emoji are actually very important in the communication, even in the workplace. So we try to keep them, and you have customized stickers. And we really think it's important for teams to bond together. Then we added, for instance, this is a small detail, but that's important. We added images that could become cover images. And this is the kind of very delightful details that actually make the experience more unique and make people interact more with the product. Then we have Taco. So I don't know if you've heard about Taco, but we love him. He's actually a real dog from Joel Spolsky, the person you saw at the beginning. He's a real Yoski, and we try to use it as much as we can, but also as little as we can, because we don't want to be too intrusive with Taco. And something, I work with international, so my role is also to adapt Trello to different countries. And so in some countries, Taco is like the best thing ever, everybody loves it, and blah, blah, blah. In other countries, it's like, okay, it's nice, but you know, don't really care. So this is the kind of thing we try to adapt to every country. And this is us. So we love this kind of picture. We do it every year. We point somewhere and look somewhere else, and we love to do that. And this is like trying to kind of like bring the fan together when we are together, and we love to do it. And then if you want more information on specific contents about the Nordics, we have this Medium page that's called On the Same Page. And so this is where we share stories about local companies. This is where we share pain points that are local. One thing, for instance, in the US, 42% of the population works remote. In France, it's 2%. So the reality is very different. And in the Nordics, I don't know the specific number, but I know it's in between, because every time I talk with you, there are a lot of people that work remote, but not 42% yet. So this is where we share things about collaboration, cross-team communication, and try to share more about our story also. And now I will give the mic to Unicef. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Alexia. As someone that works remote every single day with my teams and someone that uses Trello every single day, I found a lot of that very, very informative and helpful for me. My name is Christopher Brooks. I work with Unicef, and I work as part of a team that's called the Global Innovation Center. It's a group within the Unicef Innovation umbrella, where we do some of the most interesting things, I think, that are happening at Unicef today. I want to talk to you about we're calling it extreme remote working, but it sounds like a lot of the same practices and a lot of the same technologies that we're using are in use at Trello, and I'm sure some of the companies that you work with as well. But I'm going to go through a case study about a recent execution we had where we had to work in a very, you might call it a sprint if you were doing development, but we had to do a really fast emergency execution. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about our day-to-day usage of Trello and other platforms to help us work better remotely. So the function of the GIC within UNICEF Innovation is that we help build global scale for ideas that have come out of UNICEF Innovation. So there are a couple different groups within that umbrella. There's the Futures Group that takes the very beginning ideas of entrepreneurs all over the world and tries to get them from like the seed stage to having some kind of an idea that's somewhat executable. We have the Ventures team that takes those executable ideas and invests in them and starts to begin the scale process. And then at the very bottom of the diagram here, we have my team, which is when we get to the scale area of how can we make this work across multiple countries? How can we make it work potentially even globally and in different situations? We are a fully remote working team of 17 people. We have 11 locations that we're all based around the world, including Bangkok, Hanoi, Dakar, Santiago, and Copenhagen. We have 71% of us telework, 53% are nomadic, and 41% work full-time. So even outside of the remote aspects of things, we have a lot of flexibility and interesting ways of people engaging with the team, even if it's not every single minute of every day in the office. We work daily with 190 countries, which is quite a lot, in every region of the world, and that means that we're across 39 time zones, because that is all the time zones that there are. So my role at GIC, I work on a project called UReport. UReport is a youth-focused platform that allows us to send information and receive information from young people all over the world. UReport is considered to be owned by young people, but it's administrated by a steering committee that's made up of a couple different partners, like Unicef, the Scouting Organization, Girl Guides, and other youth-focused organizations around the world. We use UReport in a couple different contexts, but the major way we use it is we use it to amplify the voices of young people to decision makers, because we at UNICEF believe that young people should have a voice when decisions are being made that affect the world that they will grow into or live in today, for example. So my major responsibility as part of the UReport team is scaling the platform. And my experience before UNICEF was around digital marketing, and that makes me a very logical choice for the person that's in charge of paid media recruitment. And then my background in digital also makes me connected with a lot of other things that we do within UReport. I'm going to talk a little bit about Rapid Pro. Rapid Pro is the technology that underlies UReport and allows us to connect with different messaging platforms to exchange information with young people. It's an open source platform. Essentially, it allows us to create messaging flows. It's a little bit like when you call an automated telephone number and you're asked to press 1 for this and 2 for that, except it's text-based, so we can provide more information and receive more information, and it's also much smarter. It connects into multiple messaging platforms like Facebook Messenger, Viber, SMS, which means that we can reach a larger portion of the population around the world. Either it's people that don't have smartphones and can connect by SMS, or it's people that are in a country where Viber is much more popular and powerful than Facebook Messenger, for example. We have UReport projects, we call them. They're individual country projects in 39 different countries around the world. And each one of those requires a different instance of Rapid Pro to be proposed within the UNICEF framework for that kind of thing, and funded within the UNICEF framework for that kind of thing, and then actually implemented with the technology side. It's a huge amount of work, and you'll see in a second how it all looks. Rapid Pro, beyond the stuff that we do at UReport, is also used for other tools that we have within UNICEF, like EduTrack, mHealth, and 1000 Days. So it's very robust, allows us to do a lot of good work. But it also takes a lot of work to set up, and it takes a lot of work to manage. So this Trello board I wanted to share is what's called our Rapid Pro deployment pipeline. We think of this as a workflow, moving from left to right as workflows tend to, taking everyone, a different country through the stages from initial interest all the way to formal interest, as we would call it at UNICEF, to exploring and prototyping and scoping and design research. The process involves so many different steps along the way, and also so many different stakeholders, both in our group and in the groups at each different country, that it's a tremendous tool for us to be able to organize this information as it is here, and to have everyone be able to contribute and view at the same time simultaneously. You can't see it here, but this goes, I think, another 7 lists off to the side to the right. We use it as a knowledge repository as well. Whenever we have a conversation with one of the countries we're working with, we'll write down what the conversation was about, so that the next person that speaks to that country, all they have to do is go look at that card for that country to get caught up to where the discussions are for that particular phase. So all in all, we have 222 individual country and product combinations that we're tracking here. So it's a little more than the rule of 5, but it allows us to keep a permanent record as well. So not only do we have the projects here that are in process, we also have projects that are parking lotted, where for example, the team wants to do it, but they're waiting for something 6 months down the road before they can actually execute. We use it as a process, but also a way to organize all our information for this project. Beyond Trello, as a way of communicating within the Report group, but also as a way of communicating within the Global Innovation Center, we use different tools for different purposes. And Alexia was saying that at Trello, one of the guiding principles is that you should communicate with people on the platforms they want to be communicated to on. We took that a little differently. We had people that were working remotely already, and a lot of people had a lot of preferences for the platforms they wanted to use. The approach we took was we all got together. We had a summit in Amman, and we said, we want to pick out the best platform for us for each of the different tasks that we think we have to do as we go about doing our work. And the result of that is, and I've kind of taken the initiative to plot this on two different charts here, but we have tools that allow us to temporarily save information versus permanently save information, and we have tools that allow us to collaborate versus store information and data. You know, as I was making this chart, it occurred to me that process in Amman, what it allowed us to do was remove a lot of the duplication that we have in the tools that we use. So WhatsApp here is very temporary and very communicative, but there's no other messaging app that we use that's only used for that kind of connection between people. We use Skype in terms of sharing content occasionally if it's very simple and we don't need to keep it forever, but we want to share it. And we also use it to hold more formal meetings than we would on WhatsApp, because it's a better tool for that, but it also helps us store some of the knowledge from those meetings. We use Trello, which I see as kind of being in the middle of the chart here because it's so extensible. You can essentially get whatever you want out of it. We use Outlook for keeping things on the record, absolutely. That includes things like submitting your travel documents, all the way to having a permanent record of the budgets that we use for our work. Finally, we have G Suite and SharePoint. They're the two document collaboration softwares we use. We probably use G Suite a little more because of just some of the functionalities there, but they're both ways that we collaborate, not so much in real time on documents, but sharing and reading and looking at the same content at the same time. Just on the chart here, I do want to be clear, we don't use any tools that are just about storage. And that was another interesting thing for me to realize as I was putting this together. I think if I had put this chart together 5 years ago, working in a different industry, it would have looked very different, much more on the storage side. But our focus, because we're so remote, is so much about collaboration and not so much about keeping things permanently in one location. So I wanted to go through a case study, and this is less about Rapid Pro implementation and more about a situation that we had to deal with recently at eReport. This was the beginning of September, I believe, and I was in the US. I wasn't actually in Copenhagen like I normally am. And we received a little bit of a, like a distress Skype message from our colleague who works in the Latin American Caribbean regional office saying, we've identified the hurricanes, at this time it was Irma, is going to impact on the countries that she covered within, I believe it was 2 days. And she was wondering, what could we do to address the problem using eReport as a tool? We'd never done anything like this before. We'd worked a little bit with landslides in terms of disasters, but we had absolutely no content for hurricanes. We had never created an ad that would help recruit people into the system to get information about hurricanes. And we didn't have a process for putting 99% of your daily effort into accomplishing one thing across a team. Meaning that everyone was focused on this initiative from the second we committed to it. So what we did when we set it out was we said, let's come up with some goals that we can use as our guiding points towards success here. So we said we want to scale. We want to, by the end of this process, really, we want to be a state that we recruited new people into the platform, which meant they got information about hurricane preparedness, or they were able to give information about the situation in their country after the hurricane hit. We want to recruit them on Facebook and Viber. We want to engage them. By providing regular and immediate information, and by answering individual questions that come through the platform, which was one of the most work-intensive parts of this whole thing. RapidPro tries to automate as much as it can of the process, but in an emergency, you're always going to have people that have questions that are kind of uncaught, and you want to make sure that you can answer as many of those as possible. And we wanted to impact actual change in the end. So we wanted to be able to say that information generated an informed response in terms of the humanitarian efforts that happened after the storms were finished. And we wanted to be able to say that we helped those affected to better prepare for the storms as they were arriving in their countries. So we executed in a few ways. For scale, we ran ads across Facebook and Viber. We ran them in 3 languages because between the Caribbean islands and Haiti and Latin America, you have English, Spanish, and French. So we brought on volunteer translators to help with that. We targeted these ads differently to each country based on when the hurricane was going to hit. And at the end of the process, we actually began to provide information about hurricane impact times in the ad itself. We engaged through a dialogue about these individual questions that people would have, like what illnesses might there be after the hurricane, or my daughter is asthmatic and unwell, what should I do in this situation? And finally, we engaged people using polls, which is one of the things that we do most often in YouReport, trying to understand at scale, what are the challenges faced by people in the recovery zones? And it might be that they don't have water, it might be they don't have food, or they don't have electricity, for example. Time zones were a major factor in this. We had the benefit of everyone being entirely invested in this, which meant that everyone's full workday and then probably about 4 or 5 hours after the workday ended was dedicated to this response, which meant that we had naturally more overlap than we would have normally. The top box here is the GIC team. That's my team that actually worked on it. We had the Latin American Caribbean Regional Office, and on the bottom here, we also had volunteers that were working with us that were based in different parts of Europe and in 2 different Latin American time zones. So as we were executing this, we had to think very carefully not only about when we were going to do which tasks to make sure that we get approval from the right people at the right times, but also what were the tools that we were using to continue to share that information down the road if we were in a brainstorm session. So James Powell was my boss. He works in Bangkok. And if I was in New York and I was coordinating with Lucia, who's in Santiago, and Vicky, who is in Panama City, we wanted to make sure we had a record of everything that we were doing and everything we were talking about that we could share with James when he came back online at 8 o'clock in the morning his time, or probably earlier than that. So to do all this, we used 3 tools. We used Skype, and this was used for immediate and real-time coordination. We spent almost all of our time in Skype chats with each other, and we had broken out a little bit into different topics, but it wasn't really organized that well. It was almost just like we didn't have time to put together the proper organization for this in the beginning. We did ephemeral assets, which I'm calling things like if we had translated one line from an ad and someone sent it to me and all I had to do was copy and paste it into the Facebook ad manager, we wouldn't even keep a record of that. We wouldn't worry about putting that into a longer term, more permanent storage location. We also used it for brainstorming and problem solving. But one of the things that was key, and Alexia touched on this as well, is that as we were brainstorming and problem solving, we realized that there's a kind of a tendency to say, this is all written down anyway, because we're doing it on Skype. So we don't need someone to be the scribe in this scenario. Pretty quickly we realized that it's really important to take out the most important facts and the most important to-dos and ideas from those conversations and move it on to something like Trello, which we used for mid and long-term coordination. So we used it to organize and collect our thoughts. We used it to track which countries were in which phase, whether they were in the preparedness phase, where we were sending them information about how to stay safe before the hurricane, or whether they were, for example, in the needs assessment phase when we were asking them what is missing in your life because of the hurricane. We used Outlook pretty sparingly. We used it for record keeping So making sure that the budgets were all written down and permanently recorded in Outlook was very important. We also used it for external communication. So we, I think it became pretty clear that we were moving so quickly and we were kind of all new to this process that it was a little bit like a hurricane within the process within the team. And to really brief people who were outside that process on what we were doing required us to digest the information that we had created and put it in a different form, rather than giving them a Trello board or giving them a Skype conversation. So we used Outlook for that. This is the board that I created for the post-emergency report coordination. One of the big things I learned as I was creating this is that this made a lot of sense to me. And as we kind of had agreed that we needed to have a more permanent solution for keeping our ideas and brainstorms on track, I put this together. And because I was the only person that had put input into the design of the board, I was the only person that was updating the board. And everyone else was looking at the board. But I ended up being the scribe for everything that was going on here, which was fine by me. But it was a big learning for us that having something organized ahead of time and having a mediated process where everyone decides how we should organize the information is important to get buy-in and usage of those boards. So the impact of the action, very briefly, we were able to recruit about 22,500 U-reporters, which meant that we sent out information to that many people about how to prepare for the hurricane or how to stay healthy after the hurricane. At our peak recruitment, one new U-reporter joined every 6 seconds, which for us is a phenomenal success. We engaged 8,000 individual questions, whether we answered them. On the platform that was with a team, our team individually, internally rather, but also with 8 volunteers that were French and Spanish speaking. 90% said the info that they were sent from us was useful, and 80% said they'd shared that information with more than one other person. Some people anecdotally told us that they sent it with their entire contact book in their phone. We felt very good about that information particularly. And the change that we impacted, the nutrition team that was doing the humanitarian efforts in the Latin American Caribbean after the hurricanes hit, used the information that we had collected to advocate for more nutrition coverage as part of the recovery packages. And we haven't done this yet, but we're going to poll to assess the behavior change within the next couple weeks to get an idea of how our messaging was actually able to change the behavior of people on the ground in those situations. So I've mentioned some of this, but these were our big takeaways from a process that we were kind of thrown into, that we had no preparation for, but that we knew we had to do the very best that we could in the shortest time that we could do it in. Having working hours overlap in an emergency critical response was very, very helpful for us. If you had a team that's more distributed around the world, I imagine that you can have different teams that hand over at different times, kind of like shift work. But for us, the majority of our coverage was in Asia and the US. So we had to have enough overlap in people's schedules with that challenging time zone difference. We designated someone to pull out ideas from brainstorm sessions, as I said, and put those on Trello. We said, do establish the organization systems ahead of time, like I was saying. Build a Trello board that everyone wants to use. And we said, don't overcomplicate things and take time to simplify. I think when you're sitting by yourself in an environment, you're talking on Skype and you're using text communication, but you're not actually war rooming physically with someone, I think it can be tempting to kind of go down a rabbit hole of your own design towards ideas that are really good, but take the kind of the process to a place where it doesn't need to be. We said don't expose the inner workings outside the group, keep the process internal and moderate information coming in, but also coming out. So we had people that were connected to the Latin American response for Unicef. We had people that were connected to the people that were more senior in the Global Innovation Center. And we made sure that we weren't overwhelming them, and also that the connections that they were making to us wasn't overwhelming us. And also don't use just one chat. we kind of did most of our Skype coordination in one single chat. I think it would have been very helpful and valuable for us if we had broken that out a little more granularly, because we covered so many different topics in one big long kind of text box. Great. Thank you. That is all my stuff.